Well, everyone, welcome to Ask Don't Tell. The reason I wanted to start recording is because I came on today to talk to Scott Mason. So excited to talk to him. And, have you ever had those days where it just like your whole system just explodes? And then I rebooted, you came on, and then it wanted to explode twice. And finally, we're on. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, and I'm glad we both survived all these explosions. It could be scary, but I'm sure we'll end up for the best.
Well, I'm sure you'll teach us some stuff today because some people, if that happens to them, it's the end of the world, right? And I mean, at the end, I was like, this is just a dumb podcast. At the end of the day, life survives, life goes on. But here we are. Good things happen to those that, hey, stay patient, have a smile, and just keep going.
Hey, man, you bring that smile right out. Your energy is utterly infectious. I'm stoked.
All right, man. Hey, so today on the show, Ask Don't Tell, we bring in some superstars to talk about leadership, talk about sales, talk about life. And even though a lot of people on this, a lot of the listeners are entrepreneur and business leaders and salespeople, I like bringing different perspectives into the show. So that's why I'm so excited to have you on today, because you're going to bring a different perspective. And I love that. So welcome, Scott, to the show. And why don't we just get started here?
Boom.
Boom. All right. So just right off the bat, tell us, I looked through your stuff and the first thing I saw is myths. Like people have been growing up living with myths. I know you take it into like leadership and coaching and sales, but I want to get from your perspective. What do you mean by myths? Let's just start with there.
What a great question. So, just a step back a little bit. There are a number of different definitions for myths. Perhaps we can start off with what some of those definitions are and exclude some. There are myths as commonly used as just a story that isn't true. Now, it's actually my belief that myths hit into some of the deepest truths about leadership, about sales, about professional development, personal development, the whole host of things. So we'll throw that right out the window. Let's talk about a second definition of myths. Myths, as I'm referring to them on the surface, refer to these old stories that we all had to grow up listening to in high school about gods and goddesses and monsters and heroes and all that sort of stuff. All these fantastical things that are cool, but really are guides. They're the most powerful and profound leadership development, personal and even spiritual development tools that have ever been created, because they are really telling stories that are universal cautionary tales or aspirational ones. So that's definition number two. Definition number three goes a little bit beneath that. The lessons that these stories tell are themselves powerful and geared by what myths at their most profound level represent. Thought patterns. They're expressions of thought patterns and belief systems told through stories. And so when we're talking about a myth, we can be talking about a myth that is representing an internal story that's positive, taking us where we want to go with our lives and our careers, or toxic, that can take us away from success. And toxic myths in particular are what I focus on as leadership, professional, entrepreneurial development tools.
All right, cool. So we're gonna package a lot there. That's good stuff. Hold on, but before we go there, before we came on live, you asked me if I was in New York City, and I was just curious. You asked me if I was in New York City. I said, "Whoa, why would you think?" I think why did you say that?
Hey. Cool backdrop there. As I mentioned to you before, I live in a 150-year-old building right in the middle of New York City. Your doors look just like mine. I've never seen them anywhere else. But to Oscar, let's keep it real. You've got that New York City energy.
I probably do. Hey, I lived on the East Coast for 10 years, so maybe that's what it is. I live in Colorado now, and sometimes you're just like, life is it's just a different beast from Colorado and the East Coast, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, but you know what? I think you've got a New York spirit.
All right, let's go to what you're talking about. So I guess I have to start with, give me an example. So you mentioned like 3 levels of myths, and I know you focus on the third one. And it's actually a little bit like sometimes I say like there's first level of asking questions, which is just like factual, second level of asking questions, which is deeper, and third level of questions, which is like going deep. So what I kind of got from that is your third types of myths there was going deep. So give me an example in someone's life or some of your clients of what exactly you're talking about so that we can kind of like start connecting the dots here.
Sure. One of my favorite clients is an antique dealer. When I first met him, he's a solopreneur. He was in chaos. He wasn't making as much money as he wanted. He was concerned about his ability to meet his family obligations. He felt like his whole life professionally was spinning out of control. He didn't have any time with his family, all these sorts of things. And as we began to talk a little bit about what was going on in his business, and as you know, with entrepreneurs, business and life
Time out. You just described, I just want to be clear because you're going on in such a great way. I want to describe, you just described literally 90 to 90 something percent of solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, business owners, even salespeople. So if you're listening here, he's about to unpackage something really valuable, but he's probably talking to you. Keep going.
I appreciate that, and that is so good to hear because it's all about the audience. So as we began to dive a little bit more deeply into what was really going on, what was keeping him from meeting his goals, we uncovered a series of belief systems. For instance, one of the belief systems was that he had was that I am just some regular guy. I'm unimportant. That's my family just sort of is from nowhere. There's nothing about me in my childhood or my early life that indicated that I'd be anything special. Who am I coming from this very inauspicious background to call myself a CEO or believe that I could expand into something as big as thought leadership or speaking or writing books or even building a business that could move into the seven figures. That is an example of a toxic myth of the third sort that I was referencing earlier. There's 5 of them. They have each corollaries in genres of Greek myths. Once we're able to focus on that toxic myth, we're able to get him to the place where he was able to essentially rip it up and write a new story for himself, a new, more positive myth. And now the man has gone beyond any of the expectations that he might have had when we first started working together.
All right, cool. So where do our myths, I mean, because we could say, well, our myths come from our childhood, from our parents. I mean, do they just come from, where have you found, I guess would be the question, that most of our myths come from?
Yeah. In one way or another, they come from first of all, we organize our lives in stories. And people in sales in particular really, really know this. There's nothing more effective when it comes to attempting to sell something than being able to share a story about it. Similarly, to connect to a potential client or a prospect, telling a story has enormous impact. That's because as human beings, we're wired to storytelling. We all have that capacity and we originate our lives around that. Now, there are certain types of stories that we tell ourselves because at the end of the day, on some subconscious level, they keep us safe. The problem is we often outgrow them or they aren't tied to the actual needs that we have in terms of our goals or the places that we need to move into in order to be competitive, let alone have our dreams come true. The default stories that we tell ourselves are habituated in our brains almost like ski tracks on a snowy mountainside. Sometimes those need to be erased and then a new set of tracks needs to be written. The toxic myths that I'm talking about are those old set of tracks that we've habituated ourselves to. Getting rid of them is the first step in moving forward. But there are things that we tell ourselves essentially to keep ourselves safe, even if they don't really after a while.
I kind of love the way because at the end of the day, in a way, people will say, well, I am the way that I am or do the things that I do because of my background or where I came from. And we're going to touch that in a little bit because I think it's important. Your background is important, but they take the actions or they if they had a background where they are able to take real risks, something in their background makes that possible. Like they're one of their myths is not, hey, I am afraid or scared or this is going to happen. But what I'm kind of hearing from you is our backgrounds will lead to those myths. But what I really like what you're describing here is you call them myths. Like they're not like, oh, well, this is just who I am. And people just kind of like you found a way to really connect with people to help them understand what it is that they're thinking that's not allowing to achieve what they want by saying myths. And why is that powerful? Because it's easy for me to dismiss this is how I am. But it's not easy for me to dismiss saying that's a myth. Like I'm living with a myth, a lie, and it's keeping me. So I love the way you've done that. And once you uncover those myths, then you can say, okay, how do I overcome the myth? This is really powerful stuff, Scott. Really good stuff.
Oscar, I appreciate that. And going to your last point, one thing I explicitly recommend that people do is not only begin to tell a new story, but frame it as a hero story where you are overcoming the obstacles, tapping into your inner Olympian God and seeing yourself as the ultimate version of yourself, prepared to overcome whatever obstacles are on your way.
Awesome. So you had mentioned and I want to package a lot more, so I want to kind of be brief on this, but I do think at this point, you mentioned that there are 5 like typical or major toxic myths that keep most people from being bold and decisive. And when I'm taking professional action, it could be leaders or sales or just someone in any situation. What are those 5 toxic myths that just come over and over and over? And so I'm assuming that's why you came up with them, because it's what you hear all the time.
All the time, yeah. And we actually started out discussing the first of them, the tragic origin myth. You're living out the tragic origin myth when you believe that the circumstances of your early life, your childhood, or your early professional career ultimately drive your personal or professional outcomes. That's number 1. Number 2 is the social myth. You're experiencing the social myth when you believe that decisions that you make about your life, your career, about anything should be driven by your perception of social expectations. So I only should speak to certain people because that's what people like, those who people like me speak to. I need to go into XYZ career because that's what my family wants me to be. Social myth number 2. Social 3 is the ritual myth. The ritual myth occurs when you engage in patterns of behavior over and over and over again, even though they no longer serve you, as if you are praying to the same god or goddess over and over and over again, even though that goddess has demonstrated they don't care about your ass. Number 4 is the doomsday myth. The doomsday myth is when you are afraid of taking high risk or high-risk actions or actions that will lead to some sort of dramatic change because you're afraid of some personal or professional cataclysm. If I change my approach to sales, all of a sudden, all the revenue that I'm bringing in will stop coming. The danger of the doomsday myth and the insidious nature of it is that you're focusing on this perceived disaster that's going to happen while you're ignoring much bigger looming disasters behind you that are going to come down on you like a ton of bricks and almost always are worse than what you're imagining. The 5th and final one is the underworld myth. Now, the ancient Greeks believed that when you die, you went to an underworld that was this hazy, gray, endless, featureless field where you walked around like a mindless zombie forever and ever and ever. It's a grim state of being. The underworld myth is when you psychologically, intellectually, or spiritually occupy that space where you essentially say, my situation is hopeless. I can't change it. People that are living out the underworld myth are the cynics, or they're the people who are apathetic. That's the way it is. Why even try and make a change or be active in my life? I'm going to be like this forever. Those are the 5 toxic myths, and you are right. You see them over and over and over again, Oscar.
No, I'm here.
I said you see them over and over again, Oscar.
Okay, so would you say almost all people in leadership or in sales positions or in C-suites, doesn't matter where you are, will they fall under one of those 5 categories, or are you talking mostly there are some people who fall into these 5 categories, and that's keeping them from moving forward. So like, we're all flawed. We're all,
Yeah.
we're all broken. So would everyone fall under one of those?
I can't speak for the entire population of the planet, although sometimes I think I can. But I will say I have yet to encounter someone whose toxic myths or whose setbacks aren't in one way or another captured within one of those 5 toxic myths.
Right. Well, because I'm thinking as you move forward to them, you've named them really good. You've basically have done your research and okay, what are the biggest challenges a lot of people face? Then you've named them, and you pretty much covered the entire spectrum of people. And I was thinking, wait, hold on. So if you didn't fall into one of these, either you'd be a perfect human, which in my opinion doesn't exist, right? You'd be an AI robot. Or you'd be God,
Right.
which well,
Hey, then why are you coming to me for help, right?
yeah. So you can fix your own problem, or you basically live such a boring, stagnant life in a box where you didn't have any experiences, you didn't have any parents that screwed you up, you didn't have any kids that in school that made fun of you, you literally lived a perfect life. You were basically Jesus, right? And so I'm thinking everyone falls under one of these. So if you're listening to this, the reason I'm joking around, but I'm being serious. If you're listening to this, you should be saying, okay, what he said is powerful. Where do I fall in that? Like retrospect, like if ask, don't tell. I teach people a lot of time. It's not about asking others. Ask yourself that question.
Yeah.
Where do I fall into one of 5 of those? All right, let's be honest with myself. I do fall into that. Okay, what's the solution? So what's the solution that Scott people come to you for that helps them overcome those myths, which is why you probably charge the big bucks.
Yeah, thank you for asking. The first thing you need to do is you need to identify the toxic myths that are holding you back. You need to name them. Once you name them, you can't run away from them anymore. You can't pretend they don't exist. You have to take action. And when you take action, your decisions begin to change. When your decisions change, your thought patterns change. The thought patterns that the toxic myths themselves represent completely shatter. After you do that, you're ready to write a new story. And that's where I mentioned earlier. It's important to replace the broken and discarded thought patterns with those that are positive. Write a new story for yourself in which you are a hero, the sort of individual who overcomes the monsters that the world or your own insides create. What were these stories about people like Hercules about? But people struggling to overcome their inner demons, externalizing the stories as dragons and all sorts of other fantastical creatures, but really those were symbolic of who and what we carry inside of all of us. If you're able to write a story in which you're able to overcome those demons with the expectations that you will succeed, your thought patterns begin to move forward accordingly. You're less afraid of risk. In fact, that's something that you view as essential, and then your goals start to happen.
I see. So, one of the reasons that I think this is so practical is because I get people on the show all the time that, are executive coaches, leadership coaches, blah, blah, blah. And they always have these super fancy name for stuff. And they do use the acronyms and no disrespect to that. But a lot of times it's like, okay, great. But what you're bringing is I can tell you're just you're just a down to earth kind of guy that likes to go get a pizza, right? So you've actually put this in words that like anybody can relate to. It's like, okay, I have a myth. I accept it. What's my new story? Like, all right, let's paint, let's draw, let's create that new story. So tell me a little bit of how you take people through that process. Do you have a program? Is it like a system? Is it just basically one-on-one training the mind to just think differently? Okay, this is your new story. Let's repeat it to ourselves 52 times till we believe it. If you believe it, you did it, right? So what is your process of helping them do that? But also, what could our audience, if they said, okay, I have this situation, besides connecting with you, obviously, what are some of the things they could start doing to writing or overcoming that myth and writing their own story? a different
I love
story.
that I love that you said that, because you're pointing to the most important thing of all. First of all, I'm glad you said I seem like a down-to-earth sort of guy, because like you, Oscar, right, I am a homeboy. I'm not up here to just talk. I'm here to actually bring a practical step into your life. So we've discussed the first two components of the program that I have. It's naming your toxic myth. Literally, I have my clients engage in a ritual in which they rip the toxic myths to shreds. Sometimes I have them burn it on their stove or in the barbecue, and they send me a video. People find that to be very, very moving, and I get a little misty-eyed when I see it happen too. Then, as mentioned a few minutes ago, we explore a new set of stories that break the patterns and set you up as a hero. Now, with that, there's one other thing that has to happen right away that leads into the final two phases of the program that make these new stories into something that's actionable and can lead to real changes in your life, which is what this is all about. I start off, once you write a hero story, to take one action step in that moment, to write it down. Tell me what it is, and it's something that you can do that day that will turn you into a baby hero that will get you used to moving forward. After that, we begin to bring more and more of these action steps into the room while we do two other things that are components of the program. First, I work with people to develop their charisma. By the way, Oscar, charisma is something I would never need to work with you on, because you have it, my brother. But many people aren't able to convey what their message is or communicate in a way that galvanizes the people and resources that they need in order to be able to achieve whatever it is they're trying to do. Charisma is the way that you do that. Once we have all of that together, we work to put together a mission statement and a vision statement for them and their lives, and then we build out an action plan. They're habituated to the action steps by what I mentioned earlier, starting to take little actions along the way. Then we blow it out into something that uses basic project management techniques to be able to write down the steps to the goals, figure out what might block you, workarounds, and then work together to 1 week after the next, chip away at whatever it is that you need to get there, and results do happen. This is all about driving towards practical, real impact.
Well, I mean, on a practical standpoint, like if you are continually making the same, let's say you live on fear, right? And that fear is keeping you from taking any action, but I could be using any example. Ultimately, what you're helping, teaching, overcoming is, if I can take, like, for example, let's say you take one small action step and you realize, wow, my worst fears actually never do come true. Like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it 1,000 times. Your worst fears never come true. So, wow, this worked. So now another action. And ultimately, what you're teaching the brain over a 30-day period is that those little action steps and accountability will add up to big things. So I think that's a big thing that you can take home today is, if you're stuck, like these little baby action steps of taking today, like nothing happens unless you move forward. And when you move forward, then things happen. But then eventually your brain starts realizing, oh my gosh, my pattern is not standing, is not waiting, is not fear, it's not moving, it's actually doing something. And actually I'm realizing that those myths were just myths because the action is helping me see that there's a different path. That's kind of what I heard in my words, but I might have butchered what you're doing, but that's like what somebody can take home today and actually literally just impact their lives by just taking a little action step. I loved it. I love it.
Thank you. And not only did you say it perfectly, Oscar, let's go back to the example that we talked about earlier, the antique dealer, to show how this can play out. So when I mentioned to him at one point, you're the CEO of your own company, he was like, ugh, I don't like that. That makes me sound like I'm somebody important. That's not what someone from my station in life should be.
Right.
So, the action step was to go onto his LinkedIn profile and change the word. He had managing director or something like that, even though he was the leader of the whole thing, and change the word to CEO. That's a little tiny step. Now let's see if you can survive and wake up the next morning and somehow manage to make it through the day if your LinkedIn profile says CEO. And when we realized he could do that, then we changed it on his website. Then we changed it when he did his elevator. One little tiny step after the. Now, the monster he is the monster. I have to say that I made him. Because now everywhere I go, he's like, I'm the CEO, I'm the CEO, I'm the CEO, I'm the CEO. Good. That's the sort of monster all of us could be.
I mean, you're training the brain at the end of the day. You're training the brain, and that's wonderful. So I'm curious, like, you know, if you're, I don't know if you're listening to this podcast, or you're watching this podcast, I mean, I see you, Scott, and the thought may be, I mean, I've done the research, but the thought may be, oh, well, what does Scott know? Scott, look, he's got his personality, he's funny, he's outgoing, he's got it all. Like, it's easy for him to say that. But the truth is, and this is what I found in most of my podcasts, is no one is where they are today without some revelation in their past that made them change something different, do something in their lives. They saw the benefit, and now they're teaching it to others. So I know that's the same in your story, in your past, that most people don't realize. You weren't always like this. Like, this isn't just something that came from the sky. Like, you lived through a process that now you're teaching what you have seen and know work. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's important for people to realize you're not just yapping your mouth. Like, you literally have lived the process that you're teaching.
People who are just yapping their mouths haven't earned the right to be heard. So
I love that. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So the process that I went through in order to bring this into the room and really feel it with the passion and the fervor that I do is two-step. First of all, I was an attorney for nearly 25 years. I would
never know that from looking at you.
I thank you. I'm so honored. You made my day. And you know what? I present the way I am inside. Wearing suits and all that garbage every day, it wasn't who and what I was inside. I was miserable. I had all sorts of health problems, rage issues. I was boring and bureaucratic. My breath was bad. I had rosacea, all this sort of garbage because I wasn't being authentic. And it wasn't until I started to move into a space that was closer and closer to what I wanted that things began to change. And that came about because of continually having my head being beat against the wall, being frustrated, again, bringing anger issues to the work, having issues with my health and with my body that kept me from being able to fully achieve. And then ultimately a career collapse, essentially being pushed out of the highest level job that I had because of my own behaviors that ultimately forced me to begin to look in the mirror and say, what's really going on here? Now, I had loved Greek myths ever since I was a little boy and studied them my entire lives. I knew that they were symbolic. I knew that they represented concepts like leadership and personal development as parables. But I didn't understand this deepest level that we've been talking about today until something else happened that was dramatic and I would never wish on my worst enemy. At one point after I began my current journey, I literally woke up one morning feeling like an ice pick was stabbing at the base of my skull over and over again, even though there was nothing there. Now, Oscar, over the next 10 days, that spiraled into a situation in which I lost control of my body temperature. I had fevers and aches over every inch of my body. I stopped eating and drinking. I lost 20 pounds within 10 days. And then I woke up unable to walk or stand. I went into the hospital where my condition rapidly deteriorated. I was on the verge of death. And as I lay there, seeing the end of my life, thinking, who's going to write my obituary and what do I want them to say? I realized that what was driving my future and what was possibly the only hope that I had was the stories that I was telling myself. I was telling myself a story that was full of despair, hopelessness, fatalism. I needed to shift that story, because those stories were toxic. And if I didn't, my mind was going to give up before my body did. When I began to view myself as a hero, things changed. I survived. and I will never be the same. And that's why I talk about what I do, having lived it. If this could bring me back from the brink of death, it could help your ass make more money. It could help you find a way to spend time with your family. It could help you do a lot. And I will not stop until as many people as possible hear that message, because people need it.
I love it. I mean, that's powerful. That's powerful. See, I was saving that to the end. You notice that I was saving that to the end because I knew that when I asked you that question, again, ask, don't tell, you would start speaking from the heart. And when you speak from the heart, it's powerful. I mean, there's no way to follow up with that. You know, I mean, it just is, you know, if you're listening, is what are those, you know, what are those stories? What are those myths? What are those lies? If you're in the car right now, if you're in your office, if you're in your computer, if you're on your iPad, like what, as he's saying this, there's no way that you can't have a self moment and say, what lies am I telling myself? Now, maybe you're ultra successful. I know people that are ultra successful. They have airplanes that tell themselves lies every single day. I'm happy. I've got everything. I know people that, you know, have nothing and tell themselves lies every single day. Oh, this is all I'm capable of. Like, what are those lies? And so, I don't know. I love it. I think people need to connect with you. So why don't you first? Well, no. Before I start closing down here, I know you have a book or a guide that people can reach out for. So
yes.
Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that book, that guide? I think they can get on your website and what they can expect there.
Yep, it is a free ebook that anyone can read. It's called Charismatic Olympian. It goes into a lot more detail as to my personal story, explains what the 5 toxic myths are, as well as walks you through the steps to be able to get rid of them, write a new story, build that charisma, and then develop a plan. It's also, by the way, lavishly and beautifully illustrated. My belief is if I'm going to be talking about Greek myths, I'm going to have some cool things to look at along the way. And so, that is an added thing. It is sort of a predicate to a 4-book series I have coming out, but those books you're gonna have to pay money for. This is free. You can get it on my website any old time, any way you want.
I'm curious because I have a lot of listeners. They're going to ask the question. They're going to say, Oscar, so is he saying? And again, I'm going on a tangent here. But if I follow the process, and because he's talking about my past. He's talking about changing it, writing a different story. He's talking about Greek mythology. He's talking about gods. Like, so do you ever have people who take the wrong message from that and say, he's asking me or training me or wants me to think that I am a god or the god? Because no, the reason I'm saying that is important, because if you're a god or the god, you might stop asking yourself and questioning yourself questions on how you can get better, because then you are perfection, right? Like some of the Greek. So I'm curious as to if somebody takes that direction, or they say, no, are you asking me that there's attributes of these gods that I can learn from and be a better blah, blah, blah? I want to clarify there because I think it's very important.
And I'm glad that you raised that. Interestingly, on social media, I occasionally have had people say that I'm going to hell, and that on LinkedIn of all places, but also other platforms, you are propagating false religions and all of that. Make no mistake, I'm not under the delusion that Zeus actually exists. As a matter of fact, even the ancient Greeks kind of knew it. In ancient Greece, right, we commonly are taught that they thought that the gods lived on top of Mount Olympus, but the ancient Greeks climbed Mount Olympus. We have ruins of their forts that were up there. They knew full well that these gods weren't there. These are all metaphors. So in terms of trying to propagate a belief that anyone is God himself, if that's something you believe in, no. These are fictional characters, but they do speak as to the universal human conditions. Now, as to whether I encourage my clients to feel like a god, specifically one of the Greek gods, that I vehemently said yes, because let's face it, The ancients didn't believe that their gods were perfect. Their belief system about these deities, because it was metaphorical, was very much tied to the ups and downs of the human conditions. Modern people are trained to believe that the deity that we tend to worship is perfect. That's not the ancient mindset at all. Not only that, but the Olympian gods themselves had to earn tribute. In sales language, they had to earn revenue. So they actually had to provide a service for the world. The god of the sun actually had to get his butt into the sun chariot and fly across the ocean. The Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, actually had to enable plants to grow so that people could eat. You didn't get worship if you didn't do anything for anyone. That brings into thinking the concept of service. Creativity, full mastery of your domain is part of what the Olympian mindset, as I call it, is. But also understanding that you're here to serve humanity. And if someone has a problem with the concept of serving your fellow human, I ain't the man to work with you. Right? Go to the coach for narcissists. I'm sure they're out there and will be happy to help you with your, elevate your dysfunction. Not me.
Aren't you glad? I knew I was saving that one for even the end, and I'm so happy that I asked that, because it's such a great question. And that's one of those questions, by the way, because I teach in the book Closing Intelligence, the questions that you're afraid to ask are the ones that are going to give you the most money, are the ones that are going to give you the most success, are the ones that are going to create more impact. And there's people that would be scared to ask you that question because they think it's going to get theological or blah, blah, blah. I loved your answer. And so I have this ability, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I take what you give me and I say, okay, what from this was so powerful to me? And I'll tell you what was powerful. You were saying the following in my language. Look, you're on this planet to impact and create value. And if you are living these old stories in your head where you are, literally not impacting the lives of others, not creating value, not doing anything, then, you really need to take a step back. What you're saying is all these gods actually created impact and value and did stuff. And so you're teaching that the fact that you can use that as an example, say, what are you doing to change your past so that you can impact and create value in other people's life? That's what I got out of it. I don't know if I'm wrong, but I loved it. So kudos to you.
Kudos to you. You grabbed Thor's hammer and you nailed you hit the nail right on the head, my brother.
Perfect. Hey, so tell us how we can connect with you and what you want our audience to know. And if there's any tidbit that you'd like to say goodbye with, go ahead.
myfreedomrocks.com, myfreedomrocks.com. That's my website. You can find me on every other platform from there. And I hope you find it to be educational and entertaining as well as meaningful. In terms of final words, I will simply say to everyone who is either watching or listening that we only live once. That's one thing that I learned during that illness that I mentioned earlier. I was healthy and fit, hopping around New York City without a care in the world one day. A few days later, it wasn't clear whether I would ever walk again, let alone survive, for reasons, by the way, that are a mystery to this day. We don't know what tomorrow brings. So you might as well try and live like that Olympian god right now. The last thing that I would want is for anyone to be sitting on their deathbed like I was, thinking about their obituary and doing exactly what you cautioned against. Not having helped anything or anyone, just having lived and then turned into a dusty little corpse that goes into the underworld and fades away to be forgotten forever. We each are capable of more and should become more.
Awesome. Well, there you heard it. This was great. This was a lot of fun. I mean, you're a great guest. It was a lot of fun, a lot of great energy. I think the listeners, there was a lot of value there, and I think they got a lot of great, hey, what could I do today to make a difference? And I'm sure there's someone today whose life we impacted just by this podcast. And heck, I was put on this world to impact lives. So I'm so happy to have had you on the show. If you're a listener, please tune in again to Ask, Don't Tell. If you are an individual, you can go to my website, closingintelligence.com, oscarsubrats.com, pick up a copy of the book. closing intelligence. If you're a corporation, if you are a C-level suite, if you lead a team, please feel free to reach out. As you know, we do keynotes, corporate training, speaking, and all that good stuff. Reach out to me at oscarsubrats.com. Scott, I wish you the best. Stay on so that we can just have a quick chat, and thank you for being on the show today.